Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us. If you are a repeat person, thank you for coming back. And a little bit at the beginning here might be a repeat for you, so I apologize. Um, Brian gave a nice intro on me, so I don't have a whole lot more to add about myself. I did want to show a little bit of my images. This is actually me. I thought it'd be nice to put a name to a face, and that is a little pregnant belly you see there. Dan and I are expecting our first baby here sooner than later, I'm hoping. This is a shot that he took too. He's giving me the little look, so I know he wants me to point that out. But hello, this is me. Here's a little bit of samples of some of my recent work. You'll see probably quite a bit of kids and babies in here, as that is one of my favorite things to shoot. There's obviously, as Brian said, way more on my website. I just kind of wanted to give you guys a little taste of what I offer. This is an album layout for a senior album that I did, couple wedding layouts. And this is actually a gallery wrap that I have hanging in the studio, a sample of a design on that. And one other little image there. I think that's the last little one. So basically, designing albums is one of my favorite things to do, even more so than shooting. When I shoot with in mind that I'm going to design an album for my client. Almost every client that leaves my door ends up with an album, whether it be a senior, whether it be a kid, whether it be a wedding. I am able to tell somewhat of a story for my client, and that is what I push. And people come to me for these albums, and we'll get into the albums with the kid books a little bit more later on in the webinar, which is my favorite album to do. Designing albums is my favorite thing to do. It is the complete product. It's the end result. It's what I'm able to give my client. Yes, I love stuff hanging on their walls, but normally when you shoot, you have so many images and clients have a hard time narrowing them. So this is a way that they can get a bunch of images into one finished product. I decided that designing templates would be fun so that I could share with you guys a little bit of how I design, and that's what got me started. Obviously, I'm doing templates for onOne. White House has some. You may have seen some of my work through ads, both onOne and White House Custom Color, which is my lab of choice, and I'll probably talk a little bit more about them later as well. You may have seen some of the work. Okay, so first I want to actually go to the website just to make sure. I'm going to assume most of you guys that are here have already downloaded one of the free templates, but if you haven't, this is where we're going to go to do that. The website you can see up at the top is ononesoftware.com/free/templates, and I don't know, Brian, if you want to add that in there. I am actually logged in as Dan, so when we scroll in, we're already logged in. You will have to register and log in and provide your email address, I believe is all, but they're free. You do not have to pay for them. When you scroll down, you're going to see little album templates here. We'll go ahead and click on See All. Give us just a second here to open up. And you'll see the album templates that are here. All of these are mine except for the first one. And if you guys keep an eye out, there will be more that will be coming up. I know that I've got several more, I think 3 or 4 more that should be uploaded pretty soon. Senior and a couple weddings, so keep your eye out. But today we're going to work on Senior Template Volume 1. So if you click on that, it will open it up. And this is the front cover of the album that you're seeing here. It will give you a sample. I wrote a little bit of a clip about this album, and then you will have all of the thumbnails here as well. You can click on the thumbnails, and you can scroll through these and get an idea of what the end result is that you are trying to accomplish. And I'm going to look at that back in Lightroom, so we'll go back. Once you've logged in, you'll see this big download button here. That's how you're going to go in and download. If you're not logged in and registered, you will not see that button, and you're going to wonder what the heck. So make sure that you do that before you go in. Okay, we doing okay there, Brian?
Doing great.
Okay, so let's go back in and look at Brittany's album. So this is the complete album that I gave to my client that you are seeing here. This first page is going to be the cover, and it's a panoramic because the left side is going to be the back and the right side is going to be the front of the album, so it's going to wrap around the book. So you're seeing both sides in this image. It's a 12-page album, so we're going to see 12 pages as we're flipping through. You can see as you're kind of going through this a little bit that there's funky borders, there's fun graphics, the backgrounds are a little bit more funky. I think with senior albums, rules can be broken a little bit more and you can get away with a little bit more. For those of you that were at my wedding webinar a few weeks ago, I'm a little bit more conservative would be, I don't know, almost hate to say that word, um, in how I design. I mean, I stick with the theme of the wedding. I want to keep it very simple and very elegant, and I want to match the theme. With seniors, or my husband just pointed out, they're a little bit more timeless on a wedding. With a senior, I think that you can get away with a little bit more funky and a little bit more edgy and more in the time and the style of what the senior is bringing to you. Their outfits, their clothing can be funkier, the posing, the images are funkier, so I think it's a little bit more fun to jazz up the album a little bit. I think that's the last page. So a little bit about this album before I go in and start playing with it. This is an 8.5 by 11 horizontal album. It's a press printed book, not an album. They call it press printed book from White House Custom Color, which is my lab of choice. This is going to have a gutter, so each page is an individual page. However, these two, such as that will be your left and right, still a panoramic, but there is going to be a gutter in the middle. The bleeds and the guidelines for this album are included in the template. So if you send this through White House Custom Color, you'll be ready to go just to order the album. If you have a different lab that you're using, make sure that you check the sizing that they require, as well as any gutters or bleeds that they need. And I'll show you when I open up the template what I mean by the bleeds and gutters if you don't already. But just be very cautious of knowing that this is set up already for a White House album. Doing good? People ask some questions about
Hey,
the gutters.
yeah, would you mind just elaborating on bleeds and gutters?
Yep, I'm going to open up actually the template and we'll go there on that. So here's what the template looks like. Do you have another question, honey?
Yeah, one thing that a couple people might have questions on and may not understand is these are layered Photoshop files. They're not templates for another application or templates for photo frame. You'll use them inside of Photoshop. And when we're going to show you how to do that, but if you're trying to import these into photo frame, it's not going to work. That's not what they're designed for. These are kind of the step after photo frame would be used.
Okay, that was interesting. They have photo frame in them, if that helps. So I've used photo frame content in them, but I have made my own. So here you should be seeing the actual template. So you're seeing the album I just showed you with all of the images in it. Exactly the same thing with blank holes so that it's ready for you to fill in. So let's go ahead and open up one of the pages and we will go through and let you see what I mean about all these gutters and all of that. So I'm going to work on page 11, which just to show you guys what the actual page looks like, this is the layout that we're going to work on. Okay. So here is the blank template. You can see, like Dan said, it's just a PSD file. If you look to the right in your layers palette, we have all of the pieces all separated so that we can still customize it however we want. They're labeled pretty simply, so you'll see image 3 is down there in the bottom left corner here if we turn it off and on, and the frame is right above it. That's on top of the image 3. We have image 2, and then we have image 1. So everything's on there on a separate layer. If you see the gutters and the bleeds, I actually have the guidelines, which are these blue lines on the sides. They're already in. This is the bleed, the guides for White House. I don't know. Do you want to talk a little bit about that, Daniel? I'm going to turn over to my husband just for a second.
Sorry, I was answering questions over in the questions module. What was the question? Oh, about bleeds and gutters. Bleeds and gutters are basically a safe area around the edge. Even when you send a regular photo print to the lab, if you've ever actually really compared that exact size, they usually get blown up a little bit. So some of the area right around the edge of your image usually gets cut off. And the same thing will happen when you send something to a lab for a book of any type. There's an area around the edge that usually gets trimmed off. A lot of times it's when they mount it to whatever the backing substrate is, and then they cut it off with like a big paper cutter, or they'll round the corner. So anything outside of that line you can't guarantee is going to be in the book. So you don't want to put anything really important near the edge because it might get cut off. So that's what those little guides out there are for. And did you show how to turn rulers on and off and how to drag or adjust your guides? I'm sure Whitney will show us that here in just a second. And the gutter is kind of the other thing that's very similar to that. If you're designing in a facing page layout where you see the left page and the right page at the same time, which is the way we would normally work and actually That way you can see across the spread. That's the part that goes in the middle. And the thickness of that gutter depends on how the book is mounted. Some books, that gutter will be almost non-existent, where it actually uses one big piece of paper that folds in half, and there really isn't much of a gutter at all. It's like a 1/16 of an inch. Other ones where they actually pull more of the page into the spine of the book, there could be like a 1/4 inch or even a 1/2 inch gutter for a really thick book, like a really thick wedding album that's press printed. You need to be really careful not to put anything important in that middle area. If you put someone's head through there, you know the middle of their head's going to be gone in the spine of the book.
Thanks, Honey. That was actually pretty good. We're going to talk more about the gutter in the middle on the next album. I'm going to do a children's book after I do this one. But for my senior album, this is just the right-facing page. There is a gutter in the middle, but this is the whole page. So we have the gutter lines that's in on this one. In the kid book, I'm going to show you that I design it in a full spread. So I'll explain more about the gutter on that one. The rulers are turned on my Photoshop file here. Dan just wanted me to show you guys control if you're on a PC. I'm kind of PC stupid, I'm sorry. It's Command R to turn the rulers on and off. If you're on a PC, I believe it's Control R. I apologize. To turn the rulers off and on, I prefer to keep them on. I like to see what I'm working in. And then also if you right click into it, you can change it. I think on default that it comes up as pixels unless you change it. And I prefer to have mine in inches, so you can right click on that and click on inches. The guidelines, you just drag from the rulers, so make sure you have your move tool highlighted. Click inside the ruler and just drag out, and you can put your guide wherever you need it. If you make a mistake, you can use your move tool again, and you'll see that the icon changed, and you can grab those and actually move it to where you need to go. Okay, just so you see on the size on this one too, I know I said this was for White House. I said it's an 8.5 by 11 book. You can see that it's a little bit odd on the size, so that is very important that you check that with your lab if you're not sending this to White House. Okay.
Chime in on one other thing to think about. Now, again, these templates are designed for a specific product from a specific lab. That doesn't mean you have to use that. You could print these out on your own inkjet printer at home if you wanted to, or send them to other labs, but it's going to require that you make the changes that are necessary to the page size, to the resolution, and also to the color space. Depending on who you send these to, they may need these pages in a specific color space. And you can always change that in Photoshop under the Edit menu, under Edit and Convert to Profile. And that way you can convert everything on that page to whatever color space is required for your lab.
That's pretty important to do right away. If you do work in a sRGB and that's what your images are, these are all in Adobe RGB, so you will need to change that right away. If you don't, every time you try to drag an image onto this page, it's going to say wrong color space, and it's going to flag you, and it's going to take a little extra time. So the idea of these templates is to save you some time, so make sure that you are changing that right up front. I think most of the labs work in Adobe RGB, but I know that there is some that sRGB, and if you are printing it on your own or somewhere else, you may need to do that as well. Thanks, Annie. So let's go a little bit more into the template here and go ahead and drag our images in. So let's talk about images a little bit. With senior albums, I do allow my clients to help, and I say help, select the images that are going to go in the album. I know that seniors are going to be a little bit more picky, especially if you've got a high school senior girl. They're going to care about what images are in their album. I tell my clients that they're going to get anywhere from 12 to 24 images in their album. It's a 12-page book, so I figure 24 at the most. Sometimes people might have 26, 27, but when I design, and as you saw the album, I do like to keep it simple and still tell the story without overdoing it. I think photographers can have a tendency to get a little photo diarrhea, as I like to call it, where they try to get as many images on a page as they possibly can, and I don't think that that necessarily does the client any good. I mean, you want to give the best of your work, the best images on there. I'll do full spreads with just one image, or just 1 or 2 images, and just keep it nice and simple and clean. So I try to get them to narrow it down to that. Some clients will have up to 30. I won't promise that they will all be in the book, but I do tell them between 12 and 24. I use Lightroom, and you can see here I have already 5-starred a bunch of images, and these are favorites that were selected that I would like to go into the album. That's how I will go for my favorites and start designing, is I'll go ahead and sort my rating sort by rating, excuse me, and make sure that I have all my stars. So for this particular page, I'm going to grab these 3 images. I prefer to open up all of the images that I'm going to put on the page at the same time. All of these images that I'm dragging over here for this have been finished, retouched, or they should be. You can do after, once you get it on the page, but I would highly recommend that you are fixing your images ahead of time and just pulling them as finished images onto your layout. Makes things a little bit faster and a little bit easier, I think. So I like to start with the big page first, or the big photo first. If there's a background image, I'll start with that because we have a funky background on this. We don't need that, but I want to start with my largest image first. So that's going to be this image here. I'm going to take my move tool. I'm going to click on that and go ahead and drag it right onto my layout. And then we're going to transform it. You can see that it's gigantic here and way too big. So we'll hit Command T and transform. Make sure you hold the Shift key down to keep this in the same proportions. I'm going to make this just a little smaller. It's probably good. And then I did miss a little step, so this will be good. So you can see the image over here it's called layer 1. We need this image to be right on top of the box that says image 1. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that and drag it and pull it over top of image 1. If I would have done this a different way, maybe I'll do it on the next image. Actually, we'll wait, we'll do it the next image. So the next thing we want to do is go ahead and clip that image to this black box. And if you don't know what a clipping mask is, what that will do is it will take that image and it will place it inside that box so that you can't see it anywhere but inside that box. So there's a couple ways that we can do this. We can right-click on layer 1, and you'll see a little menu come up, and click on Create Clipping Mask, and it will clip it to the box. That's one way of doing it. Oops. If we undo that, I'm going to try one more thing here. Another way of doing it is if you hold down the Option key and get right in between those 2 layers, you'll see the little bucket that kind of pops up there. Try that again. There's the hand tool. Hold down the Option key, go right in between the 2 of them, and click. It'll do the exact same thing by clipping it masked to the bottom image. I'm going to transform this just a little bit so I can have a little bit more of my image in this box, and it's there. So let's do that one more time. So for the next image, a little trick is figure out which image we're going to do. So we're going to do image 2. Click on that image 2 so that it's highlighted. Come back over here, drag your image onto the page with the move tool. Let's transform that so it's a little bit smaller. Hang on one second here. It's a little hard to see when it's that big, so I know we want a little bit smaller here. And then you'll see over in our palette here that the image dropped right above image 2, so you're already a step ahead. The last one we had to drag down and put it above the layer. If you make sure that that image, that black box is highlighted, when you drag that image over, it will put it right on top. So I'm going to go ahead and clipping mask those again with the Option key. And then I'm going to transform this image so I can see her legs. And then because this one is actually at an angle, we'll go ahead and rotate it in that box as well and slide it in. Okay, let's do this one more time here. I know this is repetitive, but we've got to get these on the page. So drag that image on, transform.
I'm gonna butt in for 1 second here, where some folks may have never seen the free transform tool in Photoshop. So if you've never seen that before, it's what allows you to control the size and the position and the rotation of a layer very easily. And Whitney's getting into it using the Command T keyboard shortcut. You can also use the Control T keyboard shortcut on Windows. When you do that, you get those little corner handles where you can change the size and the orientation of it. And you can do that before or after it's clipped to the layer underneath. Now, a couple little shortcuts I want to show you guys that can be really handy when using that tool. So I'm just going to step back a couple of steps here. And when you use that free transform command, you'll notice that the toolbar at the top up here changes, and it gives you the position, the width, the height, and the angle. And if you click on the little lock between the width and the height, it'll lock the proportions. And then next to each of the labels, for W for width or H for height, if you mouse over that, you get a little finger. It's what's called a scrubby slider. And you can actually click on that space and move to the left to make it smaller, move it to the right to make it bigger. It's like having a little slider to change the scale. And you can do the same thing with the rotate. So if you're not comfortable with using the corner handles, that gives you another way to change the size or the rotation of the image. And that can be really handy when the image is bigger than the canvas. If you're working on a small album with a really big camera, when you bring the image in, it takes up more than the whole space, so then you have to zoom out really far to find the corner handle. If you just instead click on that little lock and bring one of the handles down, it can get it small enough to be on screen so you can see your handles. So I'll let you put that back after I messed it up for you.
Thanks, honey. Let me throw this in, and I'm actually seeing a couple of the questions on here too. So somebody asked again about the clipping mask. Just make sure that that layer is above the box that you're going to put it in. So I'm going to put it in image 3, and that's layer 3. Turn it off and on so that you can see it. Hold down the Option key, Alt key on a Windows computer. Sorry again on the Windows, Alt or Option, and you'll click right in between those two layers, and you'll see that it changes from the hand to a little bucket. You'll hit click, and it clipped it to it. And then we can move it, and you can see that this image does not go anywhere outside of that black box.
Hey, Whitney,
Mm-hmm.
can you illustrate again how you're getting your images from
Yeah.
Lightroom into Photoshop?
Yep, I saw that too. Actually, that was next. So hang tight 1 second. So now that those are on the page, I will go back here. You can use whatever organizing program that you use. I love Lightroom, that's why I'm using it, but if you have something else, that's fine. On these, all I did was select the images that I was going to open up, and I hit Command E, and I'm going to edit the original. I'm just pulling the original into Photoshop. Did you want to add on that, honey?
Yeah, now that's because these images have already been retouched and all the work has been done on them. But if you live in a very strict Lightroom workflow, let's say you have done all of your retouching and work inside of Lightroom, you want to make sure that you use the Edit a Copy with Lightroom Adjustments option instead, so that you actually get all of the work you did in Lightroom into your album. So if you did color adjustments or healing brush work inside of Lightroom, you're not going to see that if you pick the Edit Original. Be sure you pick the Edit a Copy of Lightroom Adjustments instead.
Thanks. Yeah, that's going to depend on your workflow and how you do it. So this is just how I open the finished images in Photoshop. So however you guys want to do that, you don't have to copy this exactly, but I'm hitting edit and it's just opening the 3 images inside Photoshop. I wasn't dragging anything from Lightroom into the layout. They're all inside of Photoshop when I'm dragging them onto my layout. I think that I have an older version of Photoshop on my laptop, so that's why they're loose like this. I think that sometimes they're tabs. If you have a newer version of Photoshop, they might be in a tab form. I like to see mine, so I do have mine loose, so when I'm looking at them, I know what I'm dragging over. That's just a personal preference. I don't make any changes to these. I'm just closing them once they're on my page. Okay, any others, Brian, that I missed?
I'm just looking through the questions right now, but I think you're good to go for now.
Actually, I do see one that just came in. Actually, I do see one that just came in that I'll want to address, and that's about using a smart object. And you can, what we've been doing is we've really been dragging one image into the layout that's already open in Photoshop. You can also use the place command in Photoshop, which allows you to place a file in and you can put it in as a smart object. Smart objects are kind of like an image inside of an image. You can go back and you can edit it later. That's the good thing about it. The bad thing about it is the only way to place the image is to go through the place dialog, where you don't actually get to see the image. It's just like going to File, Open. If you work with Lightroom or Bridge or other image browser, it's a lot nicer to be able to find your image by seeing thumbnails of everything else, and it makes it easier to make the decisions about what images you're going to put on the page. The place command is a little clumsy for doing that, unfortunately. It'd be cool if they had a place command inside of Lightroom that would place it inside of Photoshop. They don't have that yet.
I think Dan and I have had the argument about the place command in the past, so I might have won that argument, but just because it doesn't work for my workflow. I mean, if it works for you and you have, 10 images that you're putting in an album and want to use the place command and know how to do that, that's great. I'm very visual and I need to see exactly what I'm working on and exactly what's going into my album. So this is my preference. So I want to keep going because I want to be able to get into our next album as well. But let's just do a couple things to this. The template's done. I mean, this page technically could be finished, you could be done, you could move on to your next page. If you are not happy with something due to color, if you have, I mean, this purple is pretty obnoxious, so unless you've got purple in your image, it's probably not something you'd want to use. I do want to show you guys how to do a couple of changes on the template so that you can still customize it. The template, the idea is to make this job faster for you so that you can make an album quickly. I mean, the longer you spend on an album, the less money you're making because it's taking your time away. So this can help you get the images on the page, get yourself started, and then if you need to go through and make a few changes, you're still able to completely customize it. The first thing we'll do is let's go ahead and change the background color, which has a little bit of texture in it. You should be able to see that. We'll do that by going down in your palette, and we're going to put a solid color. I think you guys should be able to see that over top. And I'm going to use the little eyedropper tool and pull something directly out of the image. And that's what I did with the purple, is I had pulled something out of her dress. So let's do something green, maybe a little darker, and hit OK. And if you'll notice, I lost the texture in this. So we do want to change the blending mode of this color fill, because right now it just dropped a complete solid color. If you don't want any texture in the background, that would be fine. But I do want to pull that texture back out of that background. So in my layers palette, I'm going to change the blending mode from normal to color. And it's all the way down in the bottom. And then it will drop that layer over, and you can see that the texture is still there. Okay, so that's a quick way to change the color. Like I said, pretty important if you don't have purple and want to do something else, or if you have a boy, he's probably not going to appreciate the purple, so very easy to fix. Let's do, is that good? Too fast? Because I think I'm going to change a couple more things. Brian?
No, I think I'd like to see you change a few more things. But can
Okay.
you actually yeah, actually go ahead. By all means, go ahead with that.
Okay, so let's make a couple more quick changes here. Let's change one of the graphics. So let's do the bottom graphic, which is going to be graphic 2. Okay, and we're gonna go ahead and pick something new in photo frame. So if go up to your onOne menu, if you have a newer version of Photoshop, it's gonna be probably on the right in a little palette. I'm gonna launch photo frame here. Give it just a second here. There we go. And we'll go on our left to adornments, and we're gonna pick a new adornment. So let's do a scrolly one. And I am just going to randomly pick a fun one here. You can see they're all here. Let's go ahead and grab this guy. There's a couple different things that we can do. In photo frame, you can see it back there, but barely, it's black. You can mess with the graphic in here. I prefer to do it in Photoshop. That's just where I'm more comfortable, but depending on how you feel, either way is fine. One thing I am going to do is go ahead and change that color to white just so I can see it, and hit apply. You can see in this little palette over here, we can rotate it, we can change the opacity, you can change the blending mode. I mean, you can pretty much do the same things here or in Photoshop. I'm going to go ahead and take us back into Photoshop, so I'm just going to hit apply. And it really is the same, and it's really personal preference. If you want to get it all set in photo frame and hit apply, you can, or you can pull it in this way. It puts it on its own layer, so you can see I can toggle it on and off. I'm going to go ahead and take graphic 2 and make it go away so we don't see it. And then let's move this graphic a little, and I'm going to transform it, so the Command T again, so it's a little bit smaller and not quite so obnoxious. And we'll just drag it into the corner. You can see on the upper right one that I've blended it a little bit more, and that's just by changing the blending mode. So let's do the same one with this. I have it on normal. I'm going to go ahead and click on normal, and let's do a soft light, and that'll blend it in a little bit. So that's a quick and easy way to change the graphics. If it were me, I had the two that were the same before. I would probably go ahead and duplicate that layer. So by clicking on that layer, pull it down to the little duplicate, and then let's drag that up to the corner. And I am going to go ahead and turn that other graphic off. And then it's transform it so we can make it a little bit different. Hold on. Go a little bit more here, and then I'm going to drag that layer above that image so that it's on top. so we can see a little bit more. And then we're keeping a little bit of a consistent flow. So now we have two different graphics, but they're still consistent. We changed the look a little bit, and there you have it. Let's do one more change on this one before I move on. I apologize if I'm going too fast. I just want to make sure that I get a lot of information here. I have photo frames on both of these two images, but I only stroked this image. And what it means by stroke is you'll see over here on image 1, I have an FX, and if you click on that little layer here, it has a stroke on it. We can turn that off and you'll see. There it is. So let's delete that effect and let's make a frame for this image. So let's open up photo frame one more time. Oh, I'm getting in trouble. I opened Photo Tools. Apparently I want to work on images. Hold on a second. Sorry about that. Hold on. Photo Tools is great too, but that's not what we want at the moment. That's my automatic habit, I think. So let's try this again. Photo frame. And I have a particular frame that I like, so we're going to skip right to that. It's in the photographic category and in the camera. And I'm going to scroll all the way to the very bottom, and it's camera 28, which is going to be the same frame that's on the other two images. You'll see that it comes up with this big black box that's trying to put a frame around the whole entire layout, which is not what I want. I just want a tiny little thin edge around my image. So we are going to turn the border on. So if you click in the second little tab, we're going to turn the border on, which will be the inner. And we're going to change the background color from black to transparent so that we don't see it, and hit apply. And now you'll see just the border. The yellow, pretty crazy. It makes it easy to see, so I'm actually going to make some changes to it while it stays yellow. You can tell that it's not around my image, so when you go out to the outside, you can see just like in Photoshop, we can adjust the sizing of the frame and move it exactly where we want it. So I'm going to go ahead and pull the sides in. You don't have to transform. This comes up all automatically for you. And again, I'm just using the yellow because it's easy to see on this layout. And then we'll go over to the color and go ahead and change that to white. And we will hit apply. And that will add our frame for us. Although it looks like it unclipped it. So the frame is right above the image. I'm going to go ahead and clipping mask that. You can see that the clipping mask is missing the little arrow from the layer 1 to image 1. So I'm going to reclip that image, and then we'll clip those together. Oh, nope, sorry. Sorry. I lied. We're going to transform this frame one more time. I didn't realize that it unclipped when I pulled it into Photoshop. So we'll just pull that in just a touch. And there is your added frame. So now it matches the little ones. So there's 3 different ways that you can customize a page to be a little bit more fitting. I want to see if I have any questions on seniors before I head on into kid albums.
So we had a couple people that had questions about how you change that background color using that color fill layer. Maybe you could go over that one more time, a little slower.
Dan beat me to the punch.
Okay, one more time. So let's delete this and do it from scratch. So you go ahead and be on the background layer, and I think I did say that there is a texture that you can see on this too, so we want to make sure that we keep that, but make sure the background layer is highlighted. And then down in the very bottom of your palette, there's a create new fill or adjustment layer. If everybody can see that, I'm going to click on that, and here's your options. So we're going to add a solid color over the background. So we'll go all the way up to the top, and we're going to click on solid color. And of course I clicked on the wrong one. I'm trying to go slow here. Solid color. And then it already comes up with whatever colors in your history, but I would like to select something from an image. So you want to click on your eyedropper tool, which I have mine already highlighted, and you'll click inside anywhere on your layout to get a color, whatever color that you're hoping for. I mean, we could go brown, you could go green, just kind of select something out of there and hit OK. And then in your palette, you'll see that it has the color fill right above the background, and obviously we see the green. Now to keep that texture that I did want, we will need to change the blending mode to blend to color. So you're going to go up to your normal and your layers palette right at the normal, click right here, scroll down and click on color. And then that will bring the texture back into the image. Is that good? Okay, Brian, we ready? I'm going to move on to children if there's
Oh
not
yeah, I'm
anything.
sorry. Yeah, I thought you were talking to Dan. Yeah, you're good to go.
I'm talking to both the boys. I don't know. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and close this because I do want to talk a little bit about kids' albums. So that's pretty much the seniors. That's what I have to share on that. If you guys have any more questions, I'm sure the boys will take care of you. But let's talk a little bit about baby books and kid albums. The layout that we're going to work on, I'm going to go back to the onOne website so that you can see the templates one more time. And it should be Kid Template Volume 2. Little Carson, Baby Carson. This is the album that we're going to be working on. So if you haven't downloaded that or you're interested in that, this is where you're going to grab it from. And here is the actual album. This is a unique product for our studio and something that we're a little bit more known for. And it's my baby albums that I design custom for my clients. That is their first year of their life. So it includes 3 shoots, but I have a lot of clients that will add maternity or they might add the 3-month and the 9-month, but typically it's the newborn shoot, the 6-month shoot, and the year shoot. It's a 24-page album, and you'll see as we're flipping through this a little bit, I include a lot of text, which we will talk about some text. I include story, I include letters from mom and dad, or in this case, in this album, I actually have a letter from big sister and big brother that were included. Depends on my client and what the story they have to tell, but it's pretty much their first year baby book. And I'll have clients that will come back with their 2nd child and their 3rd child, and they'll do the same thing again because they loved it so much. There's a letter from brother. You'll kind of see that it is a pretty different kind of album. It's a little bit more timeless. It's not as funky. It has a consistency throughout as far as colors. I'll do that even in my shoots. I kind of talked at the beginning that I will shoot for an album. So knowing that I'm doing a baby book for a client, I'll make sure that we keep a theme throughout it, even as far as colors. And with this little guy, we did blues and browns. So at every shoot, I made sure that they had something that was blue or something that was brown to kind of tie into the album. This album is an 8x8. It is flush 8x8. There's no bleeds, there's no gutters, there's no nothing on this. I have this album mounted into a fine art album from Renaissance the Book. And I don't know, Brian, if you want to throw that website in there, or Dan, that would be great.
Yeah, I'll look it up.
They mount the images into the album for me. Renaissance has a couple different options. You can send them prints, or you can have them print and send it and mount it. I prefer to send them prints so that I can quality check the images before they get them. When there's a lot of text in books, I get a little bit nervous and I want to make sure that there are no spelling errors or anything that I can triple check, I will. I do have my clients look at this and make sure that there are no spelling errors, so they do okay it before I send it to print no matter what, but there have been times that I've gotten prints back that I've still had to make a couple changes. Okay, I want to make sure. Any questions? So I flipped through this book a little bit. Hold on, I'm gonna keep going. I flipped this book a little bit. You're seeing all the pages. You're not seeing them side by side here. In the template, like this is my left side and this is my right side, I have them laid out for you guys in full spreads. So you're seeing your left and your right. To send to your lab, you're not going to probably send them an 8x16 print. You're going to have to crop these and send them the left side and send them the right side. But I wanted you to be able to see the full spread and how you're designing. The first page is just an 8x8 as well as the last page. Okay, let's go ahead and pull up in a layout and see where we're going to go from here. So I'm going to work on layout number 10. So I'm going to open that up in Photoshop. We're going to talk a little bit more about text, and I'm going to have Dan pipe in a little bit on this as well. So layout number 10 is going to be these 2 pages, so you guys can see the finished look here. Oops, and I grabbed the wrong one. Sorry about that. Like to see what the finished look is going to be. That's going to be layout number 10, so our left page and our right page. So we've got a little bit of text, some fun little features in that. So here it is. In the template on this, you're going to see there's a full black box on the right-hand side, and that is intended to be filled with an entire image. And I will do this quite a bit where we'll have just one, tight face shot or one strong image that we'll put on one page. So don't think that that's supposed to stay black. Anything that's black or a gray box is meant to have an image put inside of it. You want to pipe in?
Sorry, I was going to jump in. This is something we talk about in our more advanced classes, but I thought it would be something that we could mention here. And when you can see all the pages together, something that's important when you design up, especially if you start from scratch and you're not using a template, or even if you're using a template and you're reshuffling pages, is you want to have a certain visual rhythm. You're basically going to take the same layout or a similar layout, and you're going to repeat it several times, either by rotating it or flipping it. So you see as we go through this book that the same layout gets repeated several times, and that creates a rhythm throughout the book. You don't want each individual page to look completely different and make it look like it's designed by 12 different designers. It's going to be very jarring to go through. So you'll notice how those, as we go through the book, you see a very similar or the same layout repeated over and over again. That's not a bad thing to do. It makes it comfortable to look at.
Dan brings up a very good point also in terms of the design of a book, and I kind of will take it one step back with the creating some sort of consistency in the actual processing of the images before you put the images into the book, where you can see that the images that Whitney and Dan worked on have a very, very consistent kind of processed look to them. It's not like image 1 looks like this, image 2 looks like that, and it's different for each image. The consistency there are maybe 2 or 3 different styles, but across all these different images, it really kind of is very attractive visually. So that's something to consider as well.
Thanks. I think that was kind
And one thing that even goes further than that is making sure that you use the same colors throughout the book, the same fonts throughout the book, the same frames throughout the book. Those are all things you're going to reproduce as you go throughout the whole book. So you'll notice that whenever there's a headline font, it's the same font for all the headlines. If it's a body of text, it's the same font for all the body of text.
You guys are awesome.
Right back
Thanks,
at
boys. Okay. Sometimes it's hard to talk about yourself. I don't know. No, I'm just kidding. Good points, both of them made. So you can tell from looking at it. I forget even just as I'm speaking, but you'll see that I will start my different sections. So this book actually has 4 different sections. I have my maternity, because she did add maternity, and then I have my newborn, and then I have 6 months, which is in the middle here, and 1 year. And you'll see that I will start each section out pretty much the same. So they have a cute little quote. They say what we're going into to kind of separate the sections. However, again, as I said at the very beginning, I will keep a consistent theme throughout the whole entire book. That does not mean that, if I'm doing a blue and brown book for, say, a little girl and she has a hot pink tutu, that she can't bring it. I mean, I will put that kind of stuff in people's albums as well, but just somewhere in there, I tell all my clients to make sure that we keep that, as this little boy, blue and brown. At least bring one outfit that's blue and brown. At least bring something that's blue and brown, because I know that that's going to be the theme of their book. And we did that all the way through to the family shoot. You can see they're all in blues and browns. We had the blue couch. So that is very important if you're doing something like this. Something else to consider too, this obviously has a point. There's 24 layouts. It's a 1-year book. You don't have to use it for that. If you guys want to download this template and just pull certain pages out, or make your own, or make a smaller book, or do something a little different, I mean, feel free to do that and make it whatever it is that you want. This is just something to help you get started and help you get going. So let's go back into the template. Unless I get interrupted again here, let's keep going. And let's add the images that go onto this page. So in here, I have the images separated by session. So I have all 3 sessions in here with all of the images. And I've also 5-starred them. So you can see I'm in the last shoot here, and I've got the 2 images 5-starred. So just like we did before, I'm going to go ahead and open them up into Photoshop. And then I'm going to start with my largest image first, which is going to be here, the big black box. So my right image in my palette, I'm going to make sure that that is selected. I'm going to go to this image, grab my Move tool, take that image and drag it right onto the page. And then I'm going to transform this just to make it a little smaller, which will make it a little easier to work with here. Not quite that small. And then we'll do a clipping mask to that bottom layer again. So Option key in between the images and clip it in. And then we'll use our Move tool to get it lined up exactly where we want it. So we'll go ahead and close that image as I'm done. And let's grab the next one. Make sure you're highlighted on the next image we're clipping it to, which is the left image. Drag that over. I'm doing this a little quicker because I'm just doing the exact same thing we were doing before, just transforming it to fit into the little hole a little bit easier. And then Option key to clipping mask that to the bottom image, and then make sure you get it in where we want it. So again, here we're done. This template, this page could be finished, but there is type on this page. So I'd like to go some more into type. I have this type rasterized, I think. No, I don't actually. That'll make things easier then, I think. All you need to do is click on the type tool, so your T tool here, and you'll be able to go right inside of this and edit it. Some of the templates have rasterized type, which means they're uneditable. So if it was a quote that belonged to somebody or something that was particular to my client, I went ahead and rasterized it because I do want you guys to replace that with something else. This one is editable, so if you click on the T tool and click inside, you'll see the little text box. You will want to change this. I'm pretty sure your client does not want to see Dear Carson on their album. And I might let Dan talk a little bit about type. You want to talk a little bit about type?
Sure, I can talk about that here for a second. I'm just going to steal control here and let me just do one thing. I'm just going to copy this text into my clipboard, and I'm going to start out actually by just getting rid of this layer. Now, when you use the text tool in Photoshop or in any design program, when you want to put text in, start by drawing a box. Most people will just come in here, they'll just click, and then they'll start typing. The problem is, especially if I have a long section of type, so if I was to paste that in there, I get one long string of type that goes for like a mile to the right, and obviously I don't want that. I want it to wrap based on the area that I want to put it in. So I'm just going to undo what I just did there, and instead I'm going to click with the type tool and I'm going to draw a box. And you can, especially if you're working in a layout where you have several images, maybe you want to make that text box the same size as one of the images. Again, it's about that visual rhythm. You want things to line up. So I'm going to draw out that box first. Now I'm going to paste my text in, and I highly recommend getting the text from your clients in an electronic format so that you can copy and paste it in rather than retyping it.
That's actually a very important point and something that I always do, and I think even somebody asked that. If there is something the client wants particularly in their album, such as the letters, they need to type it and give it to me, and I tell them that they're on their own as far as spelling goes. I'm going to copy and paste it directly into the album. They still get one more final check before I send to print, but it's on them. So I don't correct people's spelling unless I catch something, but I'm not going to take the responsibility of that. I'm definitely an artist, not an English major, so I don't take the responsibility for that. I always copy and paste. If it's a quote that I found, I will copy and paste that as well. If I went online and found a fancy quote, I saw somebody asked if I needed to have permission to use somebody's quote. You just need to make sure that they are attributed on there. So just make sure it says Dr. Seuss. It's just being included in the album. I'm not selling the quote to somebody. I mean, it's just a part of their album. I have tons and tons of books with quotes and fun little things that I will use, but the more things that you can pull from your client, the more special that that album is to them. So even whether it be a kid or a wedding or anything, I will tell them if you have any quotes that mean something to you, and a lot of people do. I'll see quotes on the bottom of people's emails that they'll email me, and I'll actually grab that and stick it in their album, and they'll be stunned. So ask them for information or ask them for stuff. Some of my baby books have more story, meaning it is their baby book. It will go through and talk about they got their first tooth, they have, started crawling, started walking, and I'll have dates in there. It depends on my client on what they'll give me. Some don't have a lot of story. This one didn't have a lot. Mom and dad didn't want to write a letter, so they had the siblings write the letter, which was adorable. I have one book where there was a toddler, a 2-year-old, and then it was for her baby brother, and we had the 2-year-old draw a photo that I scanned in, and it was of a flower, and we put that in behind mom and dad's letter just so that the sibling could be included on their book. So I work with my clients as best as I can and try to get the story that I want to tell at the end of that year and be able to put all of that in the book.
Definitely, and one of the things I think we kind of alluded to it earlier, but that's kind of those points where you have the client check in. Most of the stuff we is all up to you as the designer, or up to Whitney when she's designing. But uh, if it's there's certain places where you want the client to proof that stuff and make sure everything is spelled correctly. And when we do the really expensive books, the books that are actually printed on photo paper and then bound by another provider, we always get the prints, check them, double check them, triple check them before we actually send them to be bound, because you can't really redo one of those bound books. I mean, those books are like $500, our cost to produce one of those things. You don't want to find a spelling mistake after it's been bound. Some of the less expensive books, the press printed books, like the smaller ones we use for high school seniors, those don't cost as much, and those you tend to you don't actually, because they're actually being printed and bound by them all at the same time, you don't get that proofing step. So it's really important. Sometimes we'll just print those pages out on our cheap laser printer, our cheap color inkjet printer, just so you actually have them in hand, so you can go through and double check everything. There's kind of a difference experience when it comes to proofing and reading when it's on paper versus when it's on the computer. And especially old people like me have a hard time making that translation all the time. So sometimes just printing it out lets you see it, especially for things like font size, to make sure it's going to be legible. It's very important to actually see it at the actual size.
I was going to butt in and then he covered it there, but I was going to talk about the font size. When you're looking at the computer, you look at this little letter and it looks itty bitty, but when you actually print it, it's perfect. I mean, the font size is 12 point. When you have a long thing, such as a letter or a really long quote, you do want to keep that font size a little bit smaller, even though you can't read it perfectly on the computer until you pull it all the way up close. It is completely appropriate when you print it. I mean, it's just like a real book. If you're looking through a real book and reading it, it's much more easy to read. Also making sure that the font, husband's trying to butt in, I can tell, making sure that the font is a legible font when you have a lot of text. So this is Garamond, probably, I'm guessing on here. That seems to be my, yeah, Century or Century Gothic or Garamond seem to be popular ones that I tend to like, that make it very legible to read when it's printed. If I have a fancier quote or larger thing, you saw back on a couple of the pages, let me flip back here. Excuse me for 1 second. Sorry about that. Go back to the album template here. This is a little bit larger. It's more of a graphic element than it is just a quote, but a little bit smaller quote can have a little fancier writing, a little larger, and I think is okay, but you do need to keep that long stuff in something that's very legible. Did you still want to butt in, or did I cover it?
There was one thing I wanted to talk about on the fonts, and that's some of we talked about a little bit about font size. And a good rule of thumb when you're working on this body type of text, let me zoom in a little bit so it's easier to see, is anywhere between probably 9 and 11. You don't want to get much bigger than that, but you don't want to get much smaller than 9, or it's a little bit difficult to read. What I wanted to talk about was what's called justification and leading, and that is, the first one is how things are aligned. Is everything aligned so that they're even on the left and ragged on the right, or is everything aligned in the middle, or aligned on the right? And you can control those up here in Photoshop in the toolbar. So if I set a left justification, it's hard on the left and ragged on the right. Versus if I pick centered, everything will be centered, or right justified, everything aligns to the right. And you kind of need to decide what you're going to do based on your layout, what's going to look best for it. And, if this is a block of text that's on the right-hand side of a right page, then maybe doing a right justify like this makes sense. most of the time, a good rule of thumb is to actually use what's called full justification. And you'll have to get that from the paragraph palette here in Photoshop. And what that does is it actually makes it fit the box completely left to right. It basically changes the space between the letters dynamically so that it makes one nice square block instead. And that will line up better in your layout than letting one side be ragged. The other thing we wanted to talk about is the leading or the spacing between the lines. One of the cool things you can do in Photoshop is those little scrubby sliders that we used in Free Transform to change the size of an object. You can also use here in the character palette in Photoshop to change things like character spacing, line spacing, can all be adjusted in here. So if I move my little scrubby slider over here to leading and I move that up or down, if it'll behave here. I don't know why it doesn't want to behave. We'll just set that to auto. So on audio, you can see how it becomes a very, very tight block of text. We actually want a lot more space between the lines to make it more graphically interesting. So I'll just click in that little scrubby slider spot, and as I move it, you'll see how the text grows and shrinks so that I can make it fill the box just the way I want it, just like that. So take advantage of some of the typographic tools that Photoshop offers to make your text more than just a story, to make it a good graphical element.
Okay, I'm catching a couple questions that I happened to read over the shoulder here. The font that was the scripty font was Selfish, I believe, which is the name on here. And you can get fonts everywhere. I think that's one that I downloaded. And Brian, you can probably throw these in the little reader. Freefonts.com is one place to look, as well as misprintedtype.com. And that's actually the one that's my favorite and has a little bit more funky fonts that I will download and use. And I've got quite a few from them. So they have ones that are free, I think ones that you can purchase, but fonts, they can really add something to your album. So keeping it consistent again is important, but having something that fits with the theme and the style of the album can make a big difference. I saw something else on there that I thought was good. Somebody asked about sizing. I did talk a little bit that this is an 8x8. Most of my baby albums are 8x8. However, I had a couple people request something larger, and I got my first 10x10 back and loved it. So I would highly suggest probably an 8x8, 10x10. My baby will have a 10x10. So I do like the little bit larger album, but either size seems about perfect for a baby. They do like the square. A lot of them like the chamois soft covers or, you know, soft colors or something that kind of fits with it as well. Brian or Dan, any other questions that I missed? Just trying to catch them.
Yeah, I'm just trying to answer some of these as well.
One other thing I know for sure is I had said earlier about gutters. You can see that this has a guideline through the gutter here. For the albums that I order, I'm going to go ahead and crop this into two 8x8, so it's not going to matter. If you choose to order a album with no gutter, so a full flush mount album, and you want this to be a full, you know, 10x20 or an 8x16, you will need to be a little bit more cautious of this gutter. I would also suggest being careful if you do a full spread. In our experience, and I've shared this before, the albums that have no gutter tend to fray in the middle or have a pink tint to it. And we have had this happen to albums of ours. I mean, I don't know if it matters what company. I mean, you're folding a print in half. So I think over time that is something that can happen. And I used to order all of our wedding albums that way. And since I've had damage to albums in my studio samples, I will not do it any longer. So I prefer the fine art albums or an album that does have a slight gutter. The fine art ones have a very tiny gutter, so it's really not bothering anything or hurting anything that's black. I mean, you don't really notice, but something to be cautious of. Are we good? I think I'm good with the layout design here. I think do we want to talk about, before I move on, templates? How to make a template? Or do we have anything else you want me to add?
I think if you could show people how to create a template so they could just get them kind of going, getting their creativity going, I think it would be huge.
Okay, so I'm going to go back to my senior album. And one thing I want to talk about in creating or designing your own templates, it's very important that you design an album first, then decide you love it and want to create a template. And I have had people that have came to me and asked for help on how to making a template and have tried to make one from scratch, just randomly throw black boxes on a page. I'm not really sure, but I wouldn't suggest that. I would actually design an album. Either if you don't have one already, find a favorite shoot or something that you're really excited about and want to see what you can make out of it. Make the album and then decide to go ahead and make that into a template. Creating a template is fairly simple. The one that you're seeing here, back to the senior one, is I have filled the spaces with black just to make it a little simpler and to have it have more of a fresh look to it. So when I start out, I can just fill in those spaces. It's up to you on whether or not you do that. Let's open up one of these pages that's finished. I will show you how to do it. So the first thing that I would do is make sure to clean up your palette. So over in your layers palette, I know a lot of times when I'm designing, this can get all crazy. Everything's named something different, everything's something crazy, and I don't want it to look like that. So what I would do is go through and rename stuff. So like that's image 1. It's the first image on the page. So I would double click in the layer 5 and go ahead and rename that to image 1. And then on image 2, do the same thing. And on image 3, and this is just for your help, or if you have an assistant helping you or anything, you'll have them, you'll know exactly which one you're doing. I would also probably put these in order. So we'll drag them. So we start with image 1, then we go to image 2, then we go to image 3. These are already renamed. I have graphic 1, graphic 2, background color, texture, background. So I try to make this as simple as possible. If you did other funky stuff or have layers that don't need to be there or things that you have turned off, go ahead and get rid of those so that you have a nice simple layers palette that's very easy to go back and fill in. Now, the funny thing is, you could just technically use this as a template, and I'll show you. If we go back and open one image, so let's open up this image. And then I already was on image 1. Let's just make sure we have image 1 highlighted. If you grab this image, take your move tool and drag it over. Let's transform it again so it's a little bit smaller. And then all we need to do is actually clip that image to the image 1. So we'll use our clipping mask again, and it clips it right in, and you're done. So same as having a black box, except for that the image was already there. But that's one quick way of doing it if you don't have time to go through and make the template. Now, if you want to make the template, we can do this again. So let me throw this layer away. We can fill these with black. And the way to do that is make sure you have your black highlighted here. And you're going to command click inside the layer thumbnail, and you'll see that it has little dancing ants, as we like to call it, around my layer 1 or my image 1. Click on your paint bucket tool, fill it in with black, and then deselect, which is command D, and you have a black box. So just the same as what we were working on before, you can have 3 black boxes. So one more time, you command and more in your layers palette, click on that little box there in the middle. You get your dancing ants, so you make sure you're on the right layer, make sure that that's the layer highlighted, click and it will fill it in, deselect, and we'll do our third one, click, deselect, and there is your template. Brian, I think
Yep.
that's pretty much it.
That's, I mean, that's exact. I was kind of wondering myself how you would go about doing that, and I'm definitely glad that you showed it. Um, I'm just trying to see if there are any other questions regarding textures. Some people are wondering where you get your textures from.
Photo frame?
That's that's
You just didn't want to say it.
that's a great answer. For those of you that don't know, I mean, if you either are not a photo frame customer, or if you have photo frame, we have a great deal of textures built in, and you can just go into the product um, and
I'm going to
select
open
it.
it, Brian.
Okay.
I'm going to open it here really quick. All of the templates that are on onOne's site that they're giving away for free that I've designed, the backgrounds, the textures, the adornments, anything that you see, did I not open it right? Hold on, sorry, are all going to be out of photo frame. So that's all their content. So if you want to repeat it or go look for it, it's all going to be inside of there. I'm going to open up photo frame right now. You'll see the little categories over here. We have the adornments. They're all separated by category. Bohemian's kind of fun. The grunge stuff's fun if you have a senior boy. I tend to use a lot of the scrolls and the floral on my baby books and obviously my senior girls. There's a couple fun ones in whimsy. So I would scroll through these and remember that you can still change them. You can change the color, you can adjust them, make them smaller, make them larger, you know, flip them, whatever you want to do to them. And then also the backgrounds. I tend to use the composites, and these are here, and I'll use these a lot on my senior albums. A little bit funkier. They're ones that onOne has created that have the adornments kind of already built into them. Those are super fun. What else do I use a lot of? The frames, I pointed those out earlier, which is in the photographic and the camera frames. I will use those on a lot of my images. Uh, Dan, I don't know. I use a bunch of this stuff. Because you could spend all day in here playing. I kind of found the ones that were my favorites, and I know which ones I like to use, but then I'll get a wild hair one day and just kind of, you know, scroll through stuff until I find something that's fitting for the album that I'm designing. Texture overlays are going to be at the bottom, and I will put those over top of just plain backgrounds, and you can make little textures as well.
Great.
You want to apply a texture? Dan's asking me to apply a texture. So let me grab one really quick. So let's grab this guy. Well, I have a texture on there, or it's a background layer that's on there right now. So let's see. We'll have to turn that one off. Hold on. Hold on 1 second. So if we take that background layer off, that's already there. Let me change this. Sorry, I wasn't going to apply this. So, and the texture layer that I just added is right here. So just put it over top of it and you'll see it.
And of course, you can use the tools in Photoshop to change the blending mode and the opacity of textures, or even other images. That's the way you would take one of your images and make it a texture. So you could go out with your camera, take pictures of whatever you wanted, add it as a layer, and then just change the blending mode in Photoshop to something like soft light or overlay to blend your image in as a texture.
That doesn't look so cute, but you know.
So there was a question that we had at the beginning, which I promised we'd get to, and we hadn't really talked about it yet, and that's kind of the pros and cons between a press printed album versus one that's actually printed on photo paper. And some people didn't really know what we meant when we talked about a press printed album. Some of the labs offer what's a press printed book. It's printed not on photographic paper, it's basically printed on a printing press. So it's an offset printing process, but you only have to get one book made at a time, where normally with offset printing you have to get 500 books made. You only have to get one book printed, and when you get the books back, it's a different type of paper and a slightly different look. It doesn't look like it's printed on photographic paper. Labs that offer those type of books, it's a good, inexpensive way to produce a product for your client. We really have no idea how archival they are, if they're going to last forever, but for things like a senior book, it doesn't really have to be. They're more spur of the moment. Or for things like baby books or for wedding books, those are things we're really concerned about the archival quality of them and the overall quality of the images. So those are actually printed on regular photographic paper, and then those are bound into a book. So basically each piece of photographic paper is sandwiched onto a thin baseboard, kind of like a mat board, to create one page, and then those are mounted into a regular hand-stitched book. And those are a much more expensive book, but they're going to last a lot longer. We can guarantee the color, we can guarantee the archival nature of those. So one is designed to be an heirloom, the other one is designed to be for something for a senior. I'm not worried about it lasting 100 years.
If you email me, I might regret saying this, but I have some images that I took today with my iPhone, and I was going to show and totally forgot of the difference between the press printed senior book and a baby book. So they're just quick iPhone pics, but I do have them. So if it is something that you want to see, I can definitely show you the difference.
Yeah, and you can use the contact module within their website, which I'll show in a few minutes once we wrap up.
So I
There are
think, go ahead.
there are just a few quick questions, and more so much about, like, I see a few questions asking whether you guys ever shoot against a green screen. Um,
Negative.
yeah, I didn't want to answer on your behalf, but I think I was able to. Guess
No,
that.
I try to keep it pretty real. Definitely in the moment, especially shooting with kids. I mean, I am all about chasing them around outside. Not so much at the moment, Miss Too Pregnant, but normally, I like to get on their level, get down, shoot, chase them around. We do stuff in studio, we do stuff outdoors. I think I saw somebody ask about the couch a while back. Yes, we did plan that shoot. That is a couch that sits in my studio. We got a big truck and we hauled it out to a little alleyway and we're able to use that. I try to plan shoots when I can, but a lot of times it just kind of depends on what my client brings and we go on the fly.
Excellent.
I did see one other question. That's when it actually comes to submitting these to your lab. Obviously, our most labs aren't going to be able to take the full Photoshop file. You're going to make JPEG versions of these. And if you use a tool like Lightroom, that's really easy. Once you're done designing it, all you do is use the export command in Photoshop to spit out the JPEGs that you need in the right size and the right color space and all of that. You can do that after the fact as well. So even though you might design a book in Adobe RGB, if your lab requires sRGB, you could do that conversion on the fly when you export out the JPEGs. And if your lab requires separate pages for the left and the right hand side, some of the templates you'll notice are designed to be facing pages, so you see the left and the right at the same time, which is important when you're designing so you can see what it's going to look like. But when you send it to the lab, they have to have two separate files for that. So when you get done, you have to go through and basically flatten the Photoshop image and then copy one side and the other side to new images and save those as versions. So instead of having an 18 by or an 8 by 16 canvas, you might have two 8 by 8 JPEGs that you save from it, making sure you keep the original layered Photoshop file at all times.
Awesome.
See another question about my lab. I do print the prints. All of my prints go to White House Custom Color, no matter what. So loose prints, anything that I'm ordering from the lab will go there. My press printed books, I do print through White House. That's such as a senior one that you're seeing. But any of my baby books or wedding albums, I send those to White House to print the prints, and then I take the prints and I ship those to New York to Renaissance the Book to be mounted in the album. And it's just because I want a different kind of album. White House also offers press printed albums that you can order, and I have gotten those from them before. They're good quality if that's something that you prefer. I love Renaissance though. That's just it's personal preference. So you need to go with your style, what fits your studio, what fits your budget. The ones from Renaissance are definitely not cheap, as Dan said. You're looking at more like $500 by the time you get the prints and then have them mounted in the book. I think the baby books that I order through them, the fine art books are 250, I think, is what I'd pay for the album, but you have shipping and stuff on top of that, where White House does include shipping. But I think that was it on the lab. There's plenty of other good labs. That just happens to be I have a good relationship with White House and they have a great quality. I know there's people that use Miller's and plenty of other labs out there, so please use whatever is fitting for you.
Just answering a question on the module. All right. There's still a bunch of other questions here, but I'm
Is
just
there
gonna.
any big ones? I'm happy to answer if there's anything big.
For now, I think we're good. Again, if you go to the chat module, I'll give the link here. I linked to White House Custom Color. If you go to our burner control panel towards the top, you should see the Whitney's print lab of choice is White House Custom Color. I'll put it in again here. www.
Senior book is $59. Somebody just asked that. If you do a 12-page press printed album the album you're looking at right now is 59 bucks from White House.
Now, if correct me if I'm wrong, and I remember when I became, you don't just, I know when I joined White House, it's not like you like Walgreens, you just send your images to them. You have to actually send a few images to White House. They review them, and then they create an account for you. Is that
Yeah,
still going on?
yep, five 8x10s, which it's to everybody's advantage. The 8x10s are free, but that's for you to color check it as well. So when you get those back, you can make sure that your monitor is calibrated and that everything looks great. And then they
Right.
set up your account.
Right, so it's not just a matter. Yeah, it's there's a pro, and I do appreciate this with a lab like White House, who I've used them as well, and I've been nothing but happy with them. Um, it's the kind of thing where you want, they're very, very serious about their products. They have some of the best photographers using them, so you want to make sure that you take care, send the right images, and when you get your proofs, that you color check them like Whitney had just said. Um, so
I guess one of the things to mention. Yeah, I guess one other thing to mention is, labs like White House and Miller's are professional labs. They're only open to professional working photographers. So if you don't fall into that category, there are other service bureaus that you can send your work through. But in order to work with these labs, you actually have to prove that you're a commercial photographer. That's how you make your living. So they're going to ask you, what's your website, what's your business card. Some may even ask for certain tax information from you in order to send your work to them because they want to make sure that you know what you're doing and your color management is correct. They don't want to spend a lot of time working with people who don't know what they're doing. So,
yeah, and don't take this is nothing in terms of being chauvinistic or elitist or anything like that. But Dan said it straight out. This is a professional color lab for professional photographers, and I remember I had to qualify myself to use them, but and that's because I'm willing to pay the premium that they may charge for their product. I know that when I send it to them, I know that everything that I have here at home is calibrated for color, and what they do is also calibrated. So it's just a little bit different. You want to just make sure that um, you do that. I see a question if there are if there are labs for newcomers. I mean, yeah, it depends on what truthfully, and I'm going to stick by this. Labs, the print labs at like Costco and even Walmart, you may knock me. Send an 8x10 to them or a 4x6, and I guarantee you will be extremely happy with the results.
The problem is when sending them to those places is you are putting yourself in the same shoes as your clients. You're not up in the game at all. So basically your client can go to Walmart and take their image, and what's going to happen is the image is going to look desaturated as it's printed in sRGB. It's going to look flat and you're going to have a loss of color. When you take that same exact image and you do it in Adobe Photoshop the color space, you're going to send it to White House and you're going to get it back and the color is going to pop. And I'll tell you what, that is the compliment that I get over and over and over again from my clients is, oh my gosh, the color in these images. Well, it's because they took their images to Walmart or Costco or wherever, and that they don't have that same impact. So if you're wanting to be a professional and charge money for these images, you got to up your game.
Absolutely 100% right, Whitney. That's a great point. I think just to give people options in terms of not everyone might be ready yet to use White House. Not to say that you're not, you can certainly try. Open your account. They'll ask you the same qualification questions that they asked me, that they asked Whitney and Dan, and if they're happy with what they see, they'll give you an account. I mean, they want to make money as well. But to Dan's point, they're not necessarily in the business to say, oh, on my screen it looks different. They're kind of assuming that you have proper calibration. You know what color space means. You know that you're using the color space that they recommend. So that's kind of it's a fail safe for both parties, the vendor and the customer being the photographer. So I see. I want to wrap this up
so
pretty quickly.
not to Yeah, not to drag this out any longer, but professional labs actually use a different paper in their machines than what you would get at a place like a Costco or a Walmart. They're using a consumer grade paper, which is a really high contrast paper. Whereas when you go to a professional lab, they're actually printing on a paper designed for printing portraits. This is a lower contrast, more natural color reproduction. So even though you get bright, vivid colors, the skin stays very natural and you keep all of your highlights and all of your shadows, where when it's printed on a high contrast consumer paper, you lose some of that. And that's oftentimes what the difference is. For people who are advanced amateurs or just getting into it but don't feel comfortable in sending to a pro lab yet, MPix is a great choice, and they actually have MPix Pro, which is kind of their intermediate one that you can upgrade to. And then if you feel like you're a full-on professional, you can go to Miller's, which is their high-end professional version. It's all essentially the same lab. It's just different equipment, different operations between the three.
Yep, absolutely. And just to really quickly, the last question, just because we're starting to talk about color and calibration, there was a question as to what I use for my calibration. I use a Color Monkey by X-Rite. Dan, I think you're also an X-Rite guy, um, but it's extremely
Yep, we
important.
use
Go ahead.
oh, sorry, I didn't know if that went through. Yeah, we use onOne Pros in our studio.
Yep, awesome. Exactly. So the calibration, before you guys are talking about printing or anything like that, that's all well and good. But if you can end this webinar and ask yourself, did I calibrate my display, my monitor, and say no to that, you're immediately kind of at a disadvantage. You have to, if you want to take yourself even remotely serious as a photographer, as a digital photographer, you have to have a baseline of correct color using a calibrator. I can't stress that enough. Um, what they have calibrators for all different price ranges, different options. Calibrators that'll calibrate your printer if you print at home. Calibrators for projectors. So you need to make sure that you're looking at correct color because to Dan and Whitney's point, if they didn't calibrate their display, they're running on one assumption of what their images look like. They send it to the printer and it looks totally different. And God forbid they drop ship their product directly to their customer, right away their image is tarnished, not their physical image, well, their physical image, but also their reputation. Like, this is not what I expected. So I'm not trying to be alarmist or anything, but color calibration is an absolutely critical component of digital photography. Really, the
Oh,
color the cal I'll type in the calibrators that I recommended. X-Rite Color Monkey.
All right. Well, I thank everybody for coming today. We appreciate you attending. As Brian mentioned at the beginning, these will be available online here in a couple of days, where you'll be able to download these or watch them again if you missed the beginning or have questions on anything that we covered.